What's this, you ask? Another double feature? You're goddamn right it is. With the last of the Shadow Pokemon successfully snagged, there was one thing left to do. Purify them all. And that would mean streams of Mount Battle and nothing else until we're done. But what's the problem with that? The problem is that I am boring. I am well aware of my inability to talk my way through battles. So much of these final 2 episodes was dead air, and the solution to sections like that in previous episodes was to speed it up during editing. However, avoiding an entirely sped up episode was the entire reason I smushed days 7 and 8 together, and the situation this time is even more dire, since there's no story content to break up the monotony. So, what's the solution? Well, my friends, the solution is to break out the big guns. It is with great pleasure, and admittedly a bit of shame, that I welcome you to the post-commentary episode! So sit back, relax, and join me for one last romp through this absolute delight of a game. Welcome to the finale of Pokémon Colosseum. Alright, here we go. Let's get started. It is 4 o'clock. I've been running around. Well, the starting soon screen was up. So we're gonna go check on Shuckle, who we left in the daycare last time. Last time, we also caught the last 2 Shadow Pokemon. We got Togetic, who was being used by somebody to ruin my reputation by attacking civilians with it while disguised as me. And then we also got Shuckle from the King of the Deep Colosseum, who is currently being held hostage. So let's take a look, see how it's doing. Yes, the post game is over, and what is left now is purifying my Shadow Pokemon. That is all this stream is going to be. And indeed it was. Other than the odd purification, of course. The first of which was Shuckle. Once the ransom was paid, Sunflora took her place as the next hostage. I'm gonna say that again. I took Shuckle out of the daycare and put Sunflora in the daycare. Past me, did you get that? Alrighty, Shuckle joins the Purification Club, which I'm thrilled to announce is the name of my new cult. For variety's sake, I decided to hop around the map a bit before heading to Mount Battle. The trainers there are the same every run through the place, so I thought I'd keep things from getting stale by going to other rematchable trainers first, like the ones in Duel Square or Willie at the outskirts stand. Upon entering battle with my pink-haired pal, I noticed 2 things. 1, his Pokemon have gotten just a teeny tiny bit stronger, and 2, I think my level 20 Togetic. Oh, Bayleef's ready. I had no idea. Alright, cool, I guess we're going back. Bayleef was ready to purify. I hadn't thought to check on that back in Nugget Village. Having no delusions about Togetic being helpful in my current predicament, I let it die for a safe switch into my barely higher leveled Furret. Unfortunately though, even my Pokemon at level 40 and above were suffering from a terminal case of the Gen 3s. I love these games to death, but sweet Arceus above do pre-Gen 4 movesets fucking suck. And that's assuming the Pokemon in question even have anything to use besides Shadow Rush. But into battle Bayleef and Furret went. My plan was to hope for a paralyze from Bayleef's Body Slam while Furret played support with Helping Hand, but Linu made his disapproval of that plan known loud and clear. Ariados was thrown into the fray instead, and she got right to work with Scary Face. The only way I was going to survive this was through debuffs, and I thankfully had a few scattered across the team. The greatest of all of them was Intimidate, courtesy of Stantler. Linoon must have been very intimidated, because Stantler was immediately roared away and Furret made a triumphant return. However, this allowed Ariados to put a stop to Linoon's shenanigans once and for all with a Helping Hand-powered Shadow Rush. It was definitely the Helping Hand, and not the crit. Furret, you helped, I swear. Victory was short-lived, however. I knew I was toast the second Drafford busted out the Psychic. Having a Psychic-proof Sneasel didn't even buy me any time when there was Stab Secret Powers and super effective Steel Wings to contend with. That left Stantler. If nothing else, this experience gave me the opportunity to utter a brand new sentence. Stantler was the MVP of this battle. I may have elected not to go for Hypnosis since both opposing Pokemon potentially had Early Bird, but even without it, I came surprisingly close to victory between a second Intimidate and Stantler just hitting way harder than I expected. I decided early in the battle to not use my potions when there was obviously no chance of winning, but Stantler performed so well that I suddenly felt confident enough to use a hyper potion so I could finish things out. Naturally, my hubris was answered with a critical hit from Psychic and Stantler's untimely demise. Fine. See if I care. Okay, well, for being level 53, that was pretty good. After a quick pit stop in Agate Village. Alright, Bayleef is ready to purify. I guess that happened while I was running in circles during the starting soon screen. Anybody else I should know about? We'll kick these two bozos out of my team. Update the layout, and then off we go. I was ready to ignore my humiliation and try my luck elsewhere with Piloswine and Granbull now in tow. Let's see if my fears have come true, that those levels are higher now. I bravely charged into battle with Chaser Emok, who I didn't even know could be rebattled. But of course, this is the postgame. It became clear in this moment that the levels were going to be jacked up to at least 50 no matter where I went. I guess the possibility still exists that, like, she's not a member of Duel Square proper. So maybe it'll still be relatively low level there. After huffing that copium, I secured victory for the low cost of Togetic and Stantler's lives. I'm going to do something that I almost never do when I play this game. Actually pay for the hotel. My Pokemon and I are all gonna cuddle on the bed and Rui can sleep on the floor. In what can only be described as a shocking turn of events, the levels in Duel Square were too damn high. But props to Togetic for surviving long enough to use Sweet Kiss. Alas, Mount Battle really was the only option. So it turns out calling myself Sisyphus in the last episode was accurate, because here I was, once again, at the bottom of the hill. Area 1 of Mount Battle was about as exciting as you'd expect a gauntlet of Pokemon below level 20 to be. About the most notable thing about it was Piloswine very frequently going into hybrid mode. I cruised along until Togetic was ready to purify at the start of Zone 4, followed very shortly by Sneasel at Zone 7. I kicked Vander's cheekbones in, finished out the area, deposited Togetic and Sneasel, and withdrew Mantine and Gligar. Not to toot my own horn or anything, but I think I drew a pretty cute Mantine. It's unfortunately disappeared for a couple days now. But I've had a lovely neighbor in my window. I got to watch a spider spin its web. Like, almost from beginning to end of the process. And then I got to watch it just live there. Murder a few bugs every now and again. Fix the web when it got damaged during a storm. And now it's gone. Like, the web is still there. Sort of in a state of disrepair, but the spider is nowhere to be seen. I didn't get around to naming it. And maybe that's for the best, because I might never see it again. And that would just make it all the more sad. But at least I have my Ariados. Pour one out for my spider friend. Some people are just too good for this bitch of an earth. Anyway, Area 2 wasn't any more remarkable than Area 1, and things would stay unremarkable until the levels started to pick up. At levels low enough to one-shot, most of the purification progress was made for the chunk of the gauge that goes down when the Pokemon is sent out. The battles just weren't long enough for multiple shots at hybrid mode, and even Piloswine started going into it less and less. That's actually not a coincidence though, and we'll go into why later. Regardless, zones 15 and 16 saw Ariados and Piloswine respectively now ready to purify. I put Mantine and Gligar up front to finish out the area. Stantler was closer than they were, but it was so close that I decided to just let the gauge go down the rest of the way while I walked. I beat Area Leader Arth, and Mantine learned Bubble Beam, one of the most useful moves on my current team. In the break room, I used Sense to get Stantler ready to purify, then deposited it along with Piloswine and Ariados. The new members of my squad going into Area 3 were the brave and mighty Heracross and Smeargle and Delibird. I was gonna have to suffer through this eventually. I had decided by this point that it made the most sense to go in level order, which is why Togetic got to skip the line. The next lowest levels were these two, so I took a look at exactly what I was dealing with. These powerful beasts. Look at Delibird, look at Smeargle 26. Ah. What have I done? I should have left it in the daycare after all. Thank God for you, Heracross. That was the sound of a human on the brink of despair before their task has even begun. Yeah, I'm pretty happy with how I drew some of these, and some of them really turned out kind of meh, and Delibird is one of those. That just looks a little bit goofy, but whatever. Delibird is goofy, so I think it's all okay. Alright, let's see what fresh hell awaits me out here. I was allowed to procrastinate though, because I still had a Mantine and a Gligar to work on. Mantine's progress could have been much quicker. I frequently used Bubble Beam instead of Shadow Rush, which I assume was a combination of being cognizant of Mantine's stats and it not occurring to me in the moment that Hyper Mode could only happen if I had the Pokemon use Shadow Rush. I eventually changed my mind and decided to rip the band-aid off. I kinda wanna get the loser squad up front while these levels are manageable, because I just don't think they're gonna keep up. Having both Smeargle and Delibird up front at the same time would have done irreparable damage to my psyche, so I decided to deal with them one at a time. We'll see how Smeargle does. My hopes are not high, but I think Mantine's got this in the bag, so they don't need to be high. From time to time, I have dreams where I'm being attacked or otherwise need to physically defend myself. In those dreams, I can put all the force behind a punch that I possibly can, but the result will be a harmless little tap, as if my fist had moved through water even though it didn't slow down. That's how Smeargle hits when it's awake. I do understand that to balance out Smeargle's ability to learn any move, it has to be weak. That doesn't mean I have to like it. I was able to walk off my loss to Willie, and I also wasn't overly bothered by being in over my head level-wise in Duel Square. It was inconvenient, sure, but at the end of the day, my goal at this point was to purify these Pokemon, and progress on that front can be made by something as simple as walking or sending them into battle. Winning or losing is technically irrelevant, especially if I happen to get in a hyper mode or two during the battle. The logical conclusion, then, is that the fact that I would do more damage to these Pokemon myself by throwing a wad of wet tissue paper at them is something that I took in stride, like the mature adult that I am. Is it too late to take my Sunflora back? Even though long battles work in my favor since they allow for more chances at hyper mode, battling with Smeargle just felt like such a slog. At long last though, it was time to finish Area 3. Smeargle went into hyper mode several times in this battle alone. By the end, it had cleared another chunk of its gauge. Gligar's own gauge was close, but not quite empty yet, but that was nothing running around in circles couldn't solve. As a side note, I had been referring to the gauge in question as the Shadow Gauge in all prior mentions, but I learned while editing this finale that it's actually called the Heart Gauge. After depositing Gligar and Mantine, next up in level order were Ursaring and Skarmory. Alright, let's visualize a little more clearly what we have left. It's not very much. I was expecting this to take several streams, but it might not. Not that I think I'm going to do it today, but like, maybe just like one more stream after this one. We may be coming up on the finale indeed. And I think that's neat. On I went to Area 4, where I now appeared to be in the fiery pits of hell both metaphorically and physically. Gramble was Smeargle's new babysitter, and its Intimidate kept Smeargle nice and safe while the slog continued. Frequent hyper modes kept things bearable though. Smeargle got Double Slap and Gramble got Strength, and I was feeling pretty good despite my undesirable circumstances. We're almost there. I've almost escaped from Smeargle hell. Then it'll be Delibird hell, which shouldn't be quite as bad. My expectations were set pretty low by Smeargle learning Tail Whip and then Double Slap, but its final move turned out to be the downright respectable Iron Tail. At the start of Zone 39, it was down to the last chunk of its gauge, while Gramble was ready to Purify. I love Nubble's cry. It sounds so squishy, but like not in an unpleasant way. While it was sad to bid farewell to Intimidate, I very happily brought Heracross to the front. This thing hits hard, and if it had been available earlier in the game, it might have had to duel Cherry for the fighting spot on my team. Just kidding, Cherry, you're irreplaceable. And it was time for Zone 40. During this climactic bout with Area Leader Trinch, it happened. At long last, Smeargle was ready to purify. 600 Pokecoupons felt like inadequate compensation for my suffering, but who cares? Smeargle was gone. And look at how few Pokemon I had left. We're almost there. There's my team plus these three. And I get a congratulatory nugget when it's all said and done. Nothing could stop me now. Nothing. Except Delibird. Smeargle was annoying to deal with, don't get me wrong. I did dedicate a good chunk of the script to complaining about it. Delibird, however, was a different beast. Was it technically stronger than Smeargle? Abso-fucking-lutely. And I love that for it. Unfortunately, that positive wasn't even something I acknowledged on stream because the negatives outweighing it were a far more pressing issue. The Cabaraja in the room is Delibird's hustle ability. Naturally, the in-game text doesn't give us the numbers, but according to Bulbapedia, it's an attack increase of 50% and an accuracy decrease of 20%. That 20% is already enough to make battles more of a slog than they were when dealing with Smeargle, but on top of that is Delibird's type. Smeargle has the privilege of having only one weakness. Normal's weak to fighting and nothing else, and it was never in much danger even before Bramble's Intimidate started making things extra safe for it. Delibird, however, is flying in ice. Defensively, that combination is atrocious. Electric and Fire is super effective, Rock does 4 times damage due to being super effective against both of Delibird's types, and that dual type even cancels what would be Flying's resistance to fighting and Ice's resistance to itself. Add in Delibird's mediocre defensive stats that cause it to take a lot of damage even when super effective moves aren't in play, and I have to somehow keep this thing alive for it to even have a chance at going into hyper mode. In summary, Delibird's life is constantly in peril, and if it keeps missing its attacks, the opposing Pokemon just gets more chances to attack it, inevitably necessitating a switch out which just slows down the purification process. Hustle's had a few quirks that have changed across generations. Obviously, the one relevant to my current purgatory sentence is the one that states that the Gen 3 iteration of Hustle lowers the accuracy of status moves with types corresponding to physical moves. What this means is that when Delibird learned Attract as his first new move, despite not being a physical attack or even an attack at all, Attract was still a normal type move. In Gen 3, normal type moves were all physical, and that meant it was at the mercy of Hustle just like Shadow Rush was. But Attract didn't even end up being worth using since it would usually just prompt a switch. So Delibird did its best to Shadow Rush its way to victory until the end of Area 5, after which I restarted at the bottom of the mountain. Levels would eventually get high enough to make it difficult to keep my Pokemon alive, and I can't exactly make purification progress if they're dead. Finally, we were in a place where Delibird could effectively contribute. It even fulfilled its destiny by learning Present. Meanwhile, Heracross kept up the hyper modes and was ready to purify shortly before the end of Area 1. I'd enjoyed having Heracross around, it was sad to see it go, but it was replaced with my beloved banana boy Tropius. Sadly, Tropius had to wait. It was a Delibird and Houndoom show for all of Area 2. Alright, I just need one more hyper mode, and then I think I'm finally free from Delibird. All my trials and tribulations are almost at an end. Because then it'll be Metagross and Tyranitar, which will presumably take a long time to purify. I'm sure their bars will go down real slow, but they're not going to be absolutely horrible to use. They will more than pull their weight in battle, and they shouldn't die very easily either. Sandstream's going to be a little bit obnoxious though. It's gonna hurt my Pokemon that aren't Tyranitar, and aren't Metagross, I guess. And I'm gonna have to stick through that animation of everything else getting hurt every turn. At least I was aware of what I was in for. Just one little hyper mode, that's all I ask. And then I will never ask Delibird for anything ever again. Because I won't have to, because it'll be ready to purify. My prayers went unanswered, as Delibird apparently thought it was too good for hyper mode all of a sudden. Houndoom, however, did not, but it didn't make it all the way to the end of his heart gauge before I was done with my second battle of the day with Area Leader Arth. I had been using my sense to avoid bringing a Pokemon into the next area if its gauge is practically empty already, and I thought I didn't have enough for both Delibird and Houndoom. Alright, I'll just take Houndoom into the next area, I don't mind. Delibird, though. This thing is being fired from my team, effective immediately. Turns out I did though, so that only left 6 Pokemon to go. With my suffering at an end, I added Metagross and Tyranitar to my team, and headed into Area 3 for one more set of battles before it was time to end the stream. Alright, just for fun, I want to have one of them up front. Let's go Metagross, and we'll bring Tropius, because I like Tropius. Alright, Houndoom. Farewell, and Delibird. Good fucking riddance. With this team of behemoths at my side and no bird-shaped dead weight anywhere in sight. Look, that's not a Delibird. Area 3 was nothing to speak of. Hyper modes weren't super frequent, but there were enough of them to knock out a bar from Metagross's heart gauge and 2 from Tropius's. I'm glad I get to hide how mediocre Tropius is. All I have to do is just fight Pokemon weaker than I am, and it'll look like the strongest Pokemon ever. To the uninformed, it looks like it's on par with Metagross in terms of power. Which is what it deserves, really. After making Aerial Leader Renson cry, it was time to skedaddle. Alright, I'm thinking about it now, so before I forget about it, I'm gonna go check on Sunflora. While keeping my expectations low, of course. Sunflora still had a little ways to go, so her taste of freedom was cut tragically short. I then grabbed my first batch of Pokemon, and headed to the Relic Forest for a Purification Marathon. Yeah, that'll be a perfect 12. Couldn't have planned it better if I had tried. I made a game out of guessing which moves the Pokemon would get upon being purified. So let's get started. This is gonna take a second. Metronome. I didn't say it out loud, but that was my guess. Alright, this time I will say my guess out loud. That said, I forget what Sneasel even has. I think it had Icy Wind. Alright, whatever. No guess. Okay, there's Houndoom's Feint Attack. Let's see, Ariados already got Sludge Bomb, which is plenty impressive on its own. Shadow Rush, Scary Face, Leech Life, Sludge Bomb. Okay. Nightshade, maybe? That seems kind of late to be getting that. I just don't really know what else Ariados has going for it. Spiderweb. I almost guessed that, but I wasn't sure if that was, I guess I thought that move was introduced in later gens. Can Sailor learn Confusion? I kind of feel like it can. And if it can, that's my guess. Astonish. Alright, that's lame, but whatever. Piloswine already got Dig. It already got Blizzard. What else? Shadow Rush, Odor Sleuth, Dig, and Blizzard. I don't know. Maybe Takedown or something. Endure. I did see a Swinub use that earlier. I probably could have figured that out. Sand Attack, Poison Sting, and Slash. Maybe a flying type move? Or maybe Steel Wing. I'm going to guess Wing Attack or Steel Wing. Feint Attack. Alright. I'm wrong no matter what. Alright, there's our first 6. Okay, my guess for Mantine is Wing Attack. Yay, I got one. 2 if you count Togetic, but I didn't say it out loud, so I kind of don't want to count it. And then I guess you're just not getting Sketch, so I don't have a whole lot of reason to think you're getting it in place of Shadow Rush. I don't know. This one has me a little bit stumped. Maybe... I don't know. Feint Attack seems to be the attack of the day. Okay, now we get Sketch. Granbull already got Strength. Scary Face or Strength. Huh. Maybe you'll get Feint Attack. I'm locking that in as my guess for Granbull and also for Houndoom, like I said. Heracross, I'm gonna guess Mega Horn, and for Delibird, I'm going to guess Icy Wind. Bite. Alright, well, I was in the general ballpark. Reversal, so you just don't get a bug type move at all. It's gotta be an ice type move, or else why give it the Never Melt Ice? Blizzard. Alright. My expectations were low because it's a Delibird, but apparently I just need to open my mind a little bit. Alright, and Feint Attack around him. Feint Attack! Alright, I got some right. With that final triumph under my belt, I finished the stream. 12 Pokemon purified in one stream. That feels pretty productive. And I see no reason to believe that I can't do half of that in one more stream. Alright, there we go. This is looking good. And here's where my actual team is hiding in box 3. But we've got everybody here. We got our old friends, Makuhita. We got Luna. We got Duking's Plusle. And then we have everybody we've met along the way. We have Noctowl, who helped us with Mirror B. All these friends we've purified, and we're almost done. So next time will be the final sprint. I think that time, like, now that I've got higher level Pokemon, I might actually go battle trainers other than the ones at Mount Battle. Like I tried to do at the beginning of the stream, and maybe I'll be more successful that time. But, that's gonna be it for me for now. I've got food to eat. So thank you all for watching, and I will see you next time. I was under the mistaken impression that the final stream would be a cakewalk since I had half the amount of Shadow Pokemon to purify. Well, this first stream was about 4 hours long. The final stream ended up being 6. Alright, welcome everybody to the grand finale of Pokémon Colosseum. Now, given how far behind I am with editing the VODs, this is probably not going to be uploaded till like spring or some shit, but it is being recorded on December 24th. Merry Christmas, motherfuckers. With a goal in my heart, and with a cozy new hat, I ran off to Duel Square, rather quickly at that. I engaged my first foe. The battle was fraught, with danger from Delcatty's double-edge onslaught. Retribution was swift, and I don't mean the move. I'm referring to Absol's butt-wiggling groove. With the first battle won, I moved on to the next, while a lack of hyper modes left me really quite vexed. From Bandana Guy Duel to Roller Boy Lawn, they fell one by one, and it was time to move on. In Pyrite Colosseum, my foes acted defiant. In their arena, that's probably not ocean compliant. The levels were high, the opposing Pokemon were fearless, but they were all unevolved, and my team was peerless. On Ursaring, on Metagross, on Skarmory and Absol, on Tyranitar, on Tropius, then on to Mount Battle. To purify my Pokemon is just the best fit, and that's as long as I'm willing to commit to this bit. The same stuff I said about Area 1 before still applies. Very few chances for hyper modes because everything's a one-shot, yada yada yada. By this point I was about an hour into the stream, and I'd gotten some company to keep things from getting too mind-numbing. And hello, the true Freeman, rating with 3 viewers. The constellation shines upon me. Tyranitar had cleared the first chunk of its heart gauge and learned Thunder. I decided to keep it up front because I had correctly assumed that it would take a very long time to purify this damn thing. A lot of the stream was me complaining about Tyranitar, specifically its Sandstream. Like I'd acknowledged in day 10, I had to sit through the animation of the Sandstorm doing damage at the end of every turn. This was briefly mitigated by having Skarmory up front, whose Steel typing made it immune to Sandstorm damage, so depending on what Pokemon the opponent was using, I was only sitting through 2 instances of damage at most. I've been pretty speedrun brained in the last year, but it doesn't even take that to understand how much time adds up because of Sandstream. And being Tyranitar's ability, I can't turn it off. I did my fair share of bitching earlier about Smeargle and Delibird. If I'm giving the impression that I consider Tyranitar to be on equal footing with them in the being annoying Hall of Fame, that's not the case. Sandstream was definitely annoying, but Tyranitar is very reliable in battle otherwise, not that that should come as a surprise to anybody who knows anything about Pokemon. I also just generally like Tyranitar, like I imagine most people do. Even if Sandstream damaging my own team is reason enough for me to typically not use one in casual play if it's available. Plus it's got this attack animation that looks like a goofy slap. So yeah, more annoying than most of the Shadow Pokemon, but still not approaching Smeargle and Delibird's tier. After Zone 1, I assessed where everyone was purification-wise and decided to return to some semblance of level order and put Ursaring up front. It seemed like Ursaring would be making some slow progress since it just didn't seem to want to go into hyper mode as often as Tyranitar did, but the playing field was leveled by more of its gauge disappearing at once per call. Why is that? Well, later is now. Let's talk about it. Purification and hyper mode are more complicated than I ever could have imagined when I played this game as a kid. Hell, it's more complicated than adult me gave it credit for too. This is all stuff I learned after the final stream was already over, but basically there are some aspects of purification that I was sort of right about without understanding the why behind it all, or what was going on that created the appearance of what I understood to be true. First is the heart gauge itself. Whether it be childhood playthroughs or this one, I'd always noticed that the farther into the story one goes, the slower the Pokemon purify. The phenomenon is noticeable fairly quickly. Instead of all Shadow Pokemon having the same heart gauge, split into the same 5 bars, and how fast the gauge goes down being based on being an early game or late game Pokemon, it's simply that the heart gauge has a numerical value. It has a maximum, and it goes down in increments also measured numerically based on actions taken to purify the Pokemon, sending it to battle, walking 256 steps, calling out a hyper mode, and so on. These numerical values aren't visible in-game, but they do more or less correspond to where in the story the Pokemon is meant to be caught. For example, the very first Pokemon you're meant to encounter have 3,000 points in their heart gauges. Sort that list from highest to lowest, and you get endgame Pokemon like Tyranitar and Metagross. And weirdly, Sudowoodo. Maybe working for a Cypher admin makes it a big shot. So naturally, if sending a Pokemon into battle is an action worth 150 points, of course, the same exact action will make a more visible difference on a gauge of 3,000 versus 15,000. Well, this scenario relies on that exact same action even being worth the same amount of points, and that only happens if the 2 Pokemon are the same nature. There can be a lot of variance between natures, and with all the possible natures and all the possible purification methods, things can start getting a tiny bit ridiculous. Now for where it gets fun. The frequency of hyper mode. Just like the amount the heart gauge goes down when called out of hyper mode is determined by nature, so too is the chance of even going into hyper mode in the first place. There's another part of the equation though, which is how much of the heart gauge is still left. There are three sort of behavior patterns. The chances of hyper mode start low but spike before a gradual decrease. The chances steadily decrease the whole time, and most of the natures fall into some variant of this. And finally, the chances stay the same the whole time. Earlier, I made a note of Piloswine frequently going into hyper mode only to eventually stop, and that was this mechanic at play. Piloswine had a brave nature, so hyper modes were at their most frequent when the gauge was full. I'd thought it was just luck, and to a degree it is, since it's still working in percentages, but I had no idea the chances of hyper mode were such a dynamic thing. Back to the matters at hand, though. By the end of Area 2, Ursaring was down to the last chunk of its gauge, while Tyranitar was just above halfway. In Area 3, Ursaring learned Slash as its final move and was ready to Purify at the start of Zone 30. Tropius was pretty close, and the next lowest level anyway, so it was the obvious choice for the next punching bag for Tyranitar Sandstorms. That idea must not have appealed to it, because it immediately went into hyper mode as if to minimize the time it had to be up front. In the break room, I took Bayleef's emotional support Miracle Seed away and gave it to Tropius, and then I deposited Ursaring and welcomed Chompy back to the team. 5 Pokemon to go. Between the eternal sandstorms and Area 4's proximity to lava, Tropius must have been wondering what it did to deserve what was suddenly happening to it. Meanwhile, Tyranitar learned a new move. Its first new move was Thunder, so I had thought that it maybe would get Blizzard and Fire Blast and just have an absurd moveset. So imagine my bamboozlement when it just got dumb old Rock Slide. Tropius completed its own set of new moves partway through Area 4, but that nature mechanic I just talked about was rearing its ugly head. Tropius' serious nature meant it was currently at a 10% chance per use of Shadow Rush to go into hyper mode, so it wasn't ready to Purify until I was almost done with Area 5. I swapped in Skarmory to work on next because I decided I wasn't going to bring Absol to the front until Tyranitar was done, to minimize time wasted by Sandstream from that point on. Alright, we're almost in the home stretch for Tyranitar. I just needed to go into hyper mode like, I don't know, 20 more times in a row maybe? My completely reasonable request was sadly denied, and I wrapped up Area 5. I always think that's an apron, and not just like the body of his shirt is blue. Like he just finished his shift at a convenience store and came straight here. And Blizzard. Okay, so I was almost right. All he's missing is Fire Blast. I emerged from the interior of the volcano with Tropius having been baked to a crispy golden brown. With 4 Shadow Pokemon left, I brought Bean back on board before barreling back into the bowels of Mount Battle, and it was an uneventful climb through Area 6, other than Skarmory learning Air Cutter. But the aforementioned annoyance with Sandstream had very firmly set in by this point. We are inching closer and closer to freedom from Tyranitar. I'll be honest, I'm kinda sick of it. Now, do I love him and want to boop his snoot? Absolutely. But I want Sandstream gone. It's not worth it. No matter how strong Tyranitar is, this is really driving home why I normally don't use it. Like I said, 3 hours, and I wasn't done. It's so in love, it just lost its head completely and went into hyper mode. We've all been there. And Tyranitar is paralyzed. What a day Tyranitar has had. I return! Welcome back. Eat the Clam Pearl. Well, Tyranitar has the best jaws for that and he just died, so... Maybe Metagross is hungry. We are about to have the dramatic reveal of Skarmory's final move, which I guessed was Steel Wing, so drumroll please. Steel Wing! I'm amazing! Alright, well I don't know at what point you left, but here's how we're looking. Tyranitar is almost there, but you know, by Tyranitar standards, it's very slow work, so I don't expect this to actually be done anytime soon. Skarmory's making good progress. Absol's really not at all, because it's just kind of hanging out while I use other Pokemon, so its only progress is being made by me walking. Kind of the same with Metagross, but I'm bringing it every now and then. And then I've got my old teammates back to fill the spots left by Ursaring and Tropius, because they're done. Absol is chilling in the back. I figure the Sandstream is taking up so much time. Like, each turn I have to watch each Pokemon get hurt by it. And so that's why I've got Skarmory up front. And if something happens to Skarmory, I bring out Metagross. Once Tyranitar is gone, and Sandstream is gone, then I can start using Absol again. That's kind of my thought process. After that progress report, I entered the battle with Area Leader Loco, with Skarmory and Tyranitar both closing in on the Purification finish line. And that's a hyper move from Tyranitar. This race might end up being a nail-biter. Alright, it's still anybody's game, but Skarmory's in the lead again. It's almost time to call this race. Alright, I think that's it. I think Skarmory officially has won the Purification race against Tyranitar. We're neck and neck and Skarmory pulled ahead. But hooray for Skarmory. That looks like it's the end. Alright, we're going to call Tyranitar, and let's just double check, because there might be like a sliver left. Almost. Alright, so the race is not over yet. There is time for Tyranitar to turn this around. And there's the counter. Ow. Alright. Tyranitar, this is your chance while Skarmory's dead. A few more hyper modes and you win the race. There's hyper mode from Tyranitar. Alright, well, we're restarting to Area 1. And when I send out Skarmory, that's probably going to be it. So, despite a last-second valiant effort by Tyranitar to go into hyper mode a couple more times, I think that's a race. It was a race for the ages, but Tyranitar was left in the dust by a third Pokemon now. It was back to kicking toddlers in Area 1, and next on the front lines was Metagross, who had 4 legs with which to kick them. Who cares about Metagross though? Something much more exciting was about to happen. Alright, how about now? Almost. Alright, how about now? I'm on the edge of my seat. Not literally, of course, because then I wouldn't be taking advantage of the lumbar support my chair supposedly has. I'm not sure I noticed the difference. How about now? Alright, fine. And how about now? Yay! At long last. My suffering is at an end. After this battle, we still gotta sit through the sandstorm for this battle. But after that, never again. Hi, Absol. How's it going? You've been sitting in the party just not doing anything, but now you get some oxygen. 4.5 hours. Alright. Tyranitar, get out of here. Hi, Absol. Welcome to the front of the team. Look at that. No sandstorm. Just right into the battle. We are gonna start cruising along. And now we get to see Absol's butt wiggle multiple times in quick succession. Through some skill, but mostly luck, I made it through the merciless gauntlet of Area 1 by the skin of my teeth. Fantastic. I'll tell you what's fantastic, Vander. I'm about to go get Poke Coupons. A thing I definitely need at this point in the game. Only 2 Pokemon left. The end was in sight. And yeah, hooey once again. I was right that things would start moving faster once Sandstorm is out of the picture. So since we're almost done, I'd like to take a moment to talk about this project as a whole. And project really only feels like it describes this video though, and none of the others. That's obviously because writing a script and recording it all, with a goal in my in the break room, I took Bayleef's emotional support miracle. I emerged from the interior of the volcano with Troppies having is factually more work. And because I'm doing more work, this feels like a proper project versus just trimming the fat from my VODs. But the post-commentary approach was born out of necessity. I already touched on me being boring earlier, and that wasn't just me putting myself down. I'm just no good at talking, whether that be to another person in real life or to myself in front of a mic. It's why I'm honestly hesitant to play XD Gale of Darkness in the near future, and it's why I haven't uploaded full VODs up to this point. There's just nothing there, so I felt like I had to make it watchable by cutting out sections where I don't talk. In day 1, I was pretty overzealous with it. For example, I sped through the boring parts of my battle with Justy, like the end-of-term damage from Sandstorm, and returned to normal speed when something was happening or I was saying something. It felt like a good idea at the time, but on review after the fact, it was a disjointed mess that was kinda hard to watch. So, lesson learned, I eventually settled into leaving important fights alone even if I didn't talk much during them. The thing is though, editing the VODs at all was also born out of necessity. My intention with streaming was, and still is, to be an artist first and throw in a game every so often for variety. After my very first drawing stream, I noticed that my VOD disappeared after only a week. That just wasn't something I'd thought to wonder about. I only stream once a week on average, so if someone new stumbles upon my channel, there's a good chance there's just nothing to watch to decide if they want to stick around or not. There's no record of my previous work. I just stream and then it's gone forever. So I made my YouTube channel in the first place for the sake of preservation. Then I could stream, and the stream would continue to exist months down the line. If Twitch kept VODs forever, this YouTube channel would not exist. But they don't, so it does. And I figured, if I'm going out of my way to upload a stream to YouTube, the least I can do is make it watchable. And maybe that's not strictly necessary, but it felt necessary for me. I can't edit a stream while it's happening, so it just exists as it is until Twitch deletes it. And that's fine. But in the space between clicking end stream and uploading that VOD to YouTube, I have the chance to polish things up or otherwise make them more digestible. And I felt a certain obligation to do that. So we have time lapses of my drawing streams and edited down versions of my gaming streams. And I decided that this amount of editing was what I needed for this particular set of streams. The previous approach was just not gonna work. And I am enjoying it. Like I said, it feels like I'm taking on a proper project, and as I write this script, I can tell I'm going to actually feel like I accomplished something when all is said and done. But why do all this? Why make all this work for myself when my views on YouTube average in the single digits and my live views on Twitch are even lower? It's because the chances of someone watching this is low, but it is never zero. So to anyone who's watching this right now, hi! And there we go, Metagross is ready to rock. Alright, Chompy, get up here. Shortly before the end of Area 4, Metagross was ready. I hope Chompy had a relaxing vacation in the box, but I'm glad he's back. I missed him. Perhaps this playthrough has converted me into a Feraligatr truther. Despite having given up on Hyper Mode entirely, Absol was close behind and crossed the finish line when Area 5 had barely begun. Alright. And yes! We've done it! That's everybody. My wins in this area will not be recorded. That's fine. I've already beaten the whole thing. Who cares? Aber, get me out of here. The road was difficult. But I did indeed do it before the 6 hour mark, like I said. Alright, just for shiggles. What can I afford? I have 8,500 Pokécoupons. Yeah, so like, that looks like a lot, but the TM prices say otherwise, and I can't even afford the fancy schmancy berries or the leftovers. I can get some herbs, that's neat. But yeah, the real cool stuff is still out of my price range. Alright, it's time to wrap this adventure up. We're gonna go to Agate Village, do one last round of purification, and then that's gonna be the end. There's nothing left. Except for the Colosseum mode mount battle, but I've already said my piece on that. That might happen, it might not. Don't get your hopes up. That's not what's important right now. What's important right now is the great triumph that we are all about to witness. It was back to the Relic Forest to see the fruits of my labor, and to get more moves. A Pokemon may open the door to its heart. I think there are 6. For example, there's an Absol. I guess Aerial Ace for the final move. Perish Song. Did I know Absol could use Perish Song? Maybe. I don't know. Fake Tears Lick and Slash. I don't know. Let's guess. Something. Superpower. I don't even know if Earthspring can learn that, but that's what I'm guessing. Feels a little bit out of left field, but I don't really know what to guess. Of course it's Feint Attack. It sure has been Feint Attack several times. Metagross, I guess Hyper Beam. I am amazing. Skarmory, already got Steel Wing, already got Air Cutter. Already got Metal Iron Defense, I guess? Okay, there's Drill Peck. I felt like a fool for thinking it was gonna get Drill Peck and then it got Air Cutter. I just had to wait. And Tropius, I guess Sunny Day. it would allow it to take advantage of chlorophyll and of synthesis. Solar beam. Well, believe it or not, that was my second guess. But we don't care about second guesses around here. Certainly not ones that I didn't say out loud. And last but not least, Tyranitar. So, we got Thunder, Rock Slide, and Blizzard. But I'm going to stick to my original theory. I think it's going to get Fire Blast. The fact that it got Blizzard has renewed my confidence in that theory. Damn it! What was the point of Thunder and Blizzard then? Yeah, all that XP. Yeah, I did use it a lot. Yeah, a nice special attack to take advantage of all those special moves. Rock Slide is the only physical move it has. Alright. And as much as I would love to say it, that's it. It's not it. We have a hostage to rescue. You're absolutely right, past me. Now go to the daycare and rescue Sunflower. Plus, we got Shuckle in the daycare, being passively purified. Poor Shuckle is currently being held hostage. And we will go rescue Shuckle at the end of the stream once we've purified everybody else. Money's not really an issue anymore. Like, obviously, I'll need to pay the ransom to get Shuckle back, but look, now I get prize money to rescue Shuckle from the daycare. It's gonna be real funny if at the end of this, Shuckle's not even ready in the daycare yet. Then it's just gonna be Absol, Metagross, and that's it. Other than Shuckle, but he's currently being held hostage by the daycare lady. Alright, Glasses Man Turtle. Very real possibility that you will hold the honor of helping me purify my last Shadow Pokemon. Besides Shuckle, but we don't have to worry about Shuckle. Shuckle is fine. I'm gonna go pay the ransom, and everything will be great. Oh, you know what I didn't do? One of my final acts of this series can be to get my daily berry. And then we'll rescue the hostage. The final berry. There it is, in all its glory. Yeah, I was getting paralyzed a bunch. Where was that earlier? Alright, I'm here for Shuckle. I'm ready to pay the ransom. Doing marvelously well, I'll be the judge of that. Sunflora? I thought this entire time, I thought it was Shuckle. Like, I definitely put Shuckle in here before, but for some reason I have no recollection of getting it and purifying it. Then I'm sure I've been to PC a whole bunch today, and I'm sure it's been right in my face and I didn't even see it. Yeah, there it is. Oh boy. No, for funsies, we gotta guess this one too. What do you got so far? Growth, Ingrain, and Solar Beam. I don't know. I don't think Sunflora has a very wide move pool. I could guess Sunny Day again. Otherwise, Synthesis, Razor Leaf. I don't really know what to expect from a Sunflora. After everything we've gone through, the final Pokemon is Sunflora. Here we go. I'm guessing Synthesis. Okay. I should get some credit for that being, one of my guesses, and I did say it out loud. Alright, there it is. There's Sunflora. God, okay. Well, that's everybody. And that was it. All that was left was to finish out the stream. So, take it away, past me. I'll go get my team. All the Shadow Pokemon can be together in the PC as one big, happy, purified family, and we will bid farewell. Now, let us of course not forget our wonderful Umbreon Luna and Duking's Plusle, who definitely helped us on our journey. So we have Makuhita, Remoraid, Entei, Skiploom, Misdreavus, Hitmontop, Dunsparce, you beautiful creature, Noctowl, Suicune, Quagsire, Ladian, Murkrow, Quillfish, Swablu, Sudowoodo, Quilava. In another life, you would have been on my team. Miltank, Raikou, Apom, Yanma, Fortress, Shuckle. Yeah, there's Shuckle for realsies. We got Bayleef and Furret, Togetic, Sneasel, Ariados, Stantler. Piloswine, Gligar, Mantine, Smeargle, Bramble, Heracross. Heracross is fun to use. Delibird less so. Houndoom, Absol, Ursaring, Metagross, Skarmory, Tyranitar, Tropius, and last but not least, Sunflora, the most important of them all. So important, I forgot it existed. But there we go. All caught, all purified. And of course, Cherry, Astrid, Choppy, Bean, Larry, Jasper, who led us to victory. And with that, our journey has come to a close. Our final save. Well, that is going to be it. 6 hours. And my butt hurts and I can't wait to get up and walk around. So, what happens next? Next week, I'm not going to stream. The following week, I'm going to have my first drawing stream in a while. I'll do several of those while I think about which game I want to play next. I have 2 ideas. One of them is significantly shorter, so I'll probably do that. I don't think I want to do a longer game, like back-to-back with this one. But yeah, that's kind of it. So, thank you everybody who watched. I hope you all liked this game as much as I do. It was really fun to revisit it, even if it was frustrating at times with the backtracking and the Tyranitar. But I am absolutely going to stream the sequel at some point, not for a little while. Well, that can be a later thing, but it will be coming down the pipeline. Thank you all very much for watching, and I'll see you next time.